time you got out of grad school, did that view change for you of what success could be?
Necessarily my view on what success would be. I think what going through that process and going through the MPA process taught me that success can look a bunch of different ways, that there's no one path for success. Originally I thought that, hey, the only way for me to be successful was going to be an engineer.
Another episode of Auburn MPA Goes Beyond the Books podcast, and our topic today is public service and expectations life after grad school. And our guest today is AJ Harris.
Yes.
AJ, please can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name is AJ Harris. I am a 2021 graduate of the Auburn MPA program. I got my bachelor's in the public administration program from Auburn as well. So, Auburn and the MPA program in public administration is something that's just deeply ingrained in me. I currently serve as the director of operations for the Boys and Girls Club of East Alabama, and just have been involved in public service from the city of Auburn, working my way up through that organization to the Auburn Housing Authority. And like I said, currently with the Boys and Girls Clubs of East Alabama.
Yeah, AJ, you are the first alumni to be on the podcast series. So we're happy to have you, and we celebrate and we thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you.
To be here and share your experience, with us on this podcast.
Yeah, thank you for having me. It's really for me a great recognition for y'all to think enough to invite me here to speak with you. So thank you.
Thank you. We're honored to have you. So we'll just go right into the conversation.
Gotcha.
Yeah. So while you introduced yourself, you said you held a role in the local government as customer service representative at the Waterworks neighborhood specialist, right? Yeah, and you also said you also served as the director of public relations and compliance for Auburn Housing Authority.
Yes.
So my question to you is, can you share your career journey and what actually led you into public service?
Yeah, so my role in public service actually goes back farther than that. But as a young person, I worked Parks and Rec for the city of Auburn. At that point in time, I really had no clue what public service was. Because, growing up in school, when you talk about going to college, nobody ever told me public administration was an option. So for me, it took me a long path to kind of get to understand that what I enjoyed doing was something that I could make a career out of. So originally I went in, I remember being in 4th and 5th grade and being good in math. And one of my teachers told me, hey, you're good at math, you could be an engineer. And so from that moment on, my thought process was, hey, when I go to school, I got to be an engineer because I'm just good at math and that's what you do. And that's kind of what's highlighted. And, being from Auburn, the engineering school is kind of what gets the publicity. So I enrolled in Auburn. I actually enrolled in computer science because I really love computers. So it was trying to combine both of those. But I quickly learned, and I always tell this story, it's funny for me because I was in my first coding class and we were creating codes, and we had one that we were trying to create this program, and I stayed up all night trying to figure out, why my program kept crashing and all of this. And then I got the class, turned it in, and they were like, hey, you had a letter capitalized. It should have been lowercase. And it was at that moment that I realized, hey, I don't want to work with computers the rest of my life. So, I kind of floated around trying to figure out, what I actually wanted to do, because it really broke me because, from the time I was 4th grade going on, I just knew I was going to be an engineer and work in this field. So it took me a while to kind of figure out what I did. To be honest, I took some breaks from school, just trying to, find myself. And then I'll credit a man, I don't know if he still works at Auburn University, but he was a advisor in the College of Liberal Arts, Rick Inkelball. I don't know if he's still here currently, but he actually knew me personally because I went to school with his son, and I went to him, was like, hey, Mr. Inkelball, I'm struggling, I really want to get my degree from Auburn, can you, walk me through some different degrees? And he was like, hey, I know you work Parks and Rec, would you ever be interested in like continuing that path? And I was like, yeah, what can you do to do that? He was like, well, hey, this is a degree program that really prepares you for that. So coming back in, switched my major to public administration, and I took my first intro to public admin class, and I fell in love with it. And just trying to understand, so many, I think, when we grow up, we understand all our elected officials and how that part of the government, but the administration part just always gets overlooked. And, for me and being in public administration, I want to say we're the ones that gets the work done. We're the ones with the knowledge. We're the ones with the subject matter experts. And so, getting into that class, it just really caught my attention. And
what exactly caught your attention?
For the program was, the really understanding, when we as just normal U.S. citizens or any kind of citizens, you think about, you vote for a person, that they make the laws, but you miss out the part of how did the laws even get enacted? Implemented. So, getting into that and understanding that, hey, there's people that if we, even for something as simple as they can make the speed limit in Auburn increase to 55 miles per hour every street. Who's going to make sure that's abided by? Who's going to enforce that? You got to have a police chief that's got to speak to his police officers, to his command staff. The command staff got to speak to the officers, and ultimately it's up to the people in those patrol cars to ensure that happens. So understanding from that standpoint that you need good people in every one of those roles to ensure that gets implemented in the best manner. So that was really what caught my eye, and really kind of being the person that took those laws and really kind of, I really wanted to be in more of like a leadership role of the implementation and kind of helping guide it down. So that was really what caught my eye, and really kind of understanding the full structure of the government. And really, and like I said, in my opinion, I think the administrators are the ones that are the most important people, and they often are the most overlooked.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll take you to your current role now.
Okay.
Right? So you are the Director of Operations for Boys and Girls Club, East Alabama. You oversee 3 clubhouses in Auburn, Opelika, and Troy.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and collectively you have over 150 young people or youths in clubhouses, right? So what does this role as an administrative professional at Boys and Girls involve on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, so as the Director of Operations, it's my job to ensure that when young people walk into the clubhouse, they have a good time and that they're safe, that they have the experiences that we need them. So, from what that means is, one, I got to make sure that our staff is prepared. So what does our staffing look like? How do we train our staff? What did our facilities look like? Are our facilities safe? And then, from a more of a budgetary standard, it's just making sure that, we can operate. So are we collecting our fees? Are we working with different partners in grant programs? Those grant programs, I love grants, but, people just don't give you money for free. And that's one thing you learn in public administration. So a lot of time that money is tied to a program. So are we doing the things to ensure that we can keep this money in? So, my day-to-day could be a lot of different things. It could be, from an operations standpoint, it could be that, hey, I understand in order for this club to operate efficiently today, I got to go hop on a van and drive a van for the day. It could be that today my job is more of a visionary, mapping out, what's next. It could be developing. I see that really we're not really clear on our procedures on, transportation. So, it could be sitting down, going through a transportation procedure manual and ensuring that our staff understand, hey, these are the steps that we need to take to do it. So it really has a lot of flexibility. No day is the same. Today I was on a 2-hour Zoom call about a grant that we receive, and just understanding, what are the processes and procedures in order for us to fulfill the parts of that grant. My job is good, but I think the best part of it is when I'm able to go into the club and actually see the young people and their smiles and the impact. And that's, for me, when I was going in public administration, I know a lot of administrators, they have goals of working on the federal government and working in these big federal departments, state level. For me, it was always, I always wanted to gravitate toward the local government, just because I wanted to see the impact that I make, and when I was with the city, even with the Housing Authority and now with the Boys and Girls Club, whatever I do, I could go down the street, walk into a clubhouse and see what my work is the outcome of my work. So I think that's what keeps me motivated.
Okay. So how fulfilled are you, doing this at, working in a public service organization?
Yeah. So I think, public service is one of the more fulfilling jobs for me because it's very people centric, and that's one thing that I love. I love people. I love dealing with people, and that was one thing I think the reason why I struggled on the computer science side. Computers, they're great. I love technology, but at the end of the day, the computer isn't going to give you some sort of reaction. People, you just never know what reaction. I've had some bad reactions working in public administration, but I've also had more great reactions. So the opportunity to be able to see those reactions is what's rewarding for me. Okay. We've done some renovations in all of our clubs and working through those. And when you open that up and young people come in and they see that and seeing the smiles on their faces, that's what motivates you. Mm-hmm. We bought a new school bus and outfitted that, and seeing young people ride that school bus is what motivates you. When we can take them on a field trip somewhere fun and they're having that opportunity, that's what motivates me. And that's always been how I've tried to do my career, even, when I was, on the front line, kind of going back to my initial phase. I was a customer service rep in the Auburn Waterworks department. So essentially I help people open up their water bills, pay their water bills. Mm-hmm. It may have been helping the developer, but one thing I wanted that person to do, a lot of times I may be the first interaction that somebody moving into the city of Auburn may have. Yeah. So I always wanted to make sure that when they moved to Auburn, that I was giving them that good experience and being able to have people say, hey, that was so great. Good, you went above and beyond and smiling and all of these things and was what really motivated me in that job. And I stayed in that job, to be honest, a lot longer than what I anticipated. Okay. But I think it put me on a path to really understand how the front line can sometimes be perceived, because a lot of times those people are the most important, but sometimes are typically lower on the totem pole when you talk about a structure.
So what you're saying, in essence, public administrators are just like mirror of an organization or an institution.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. When a lot of people, my boss, he says something I really love. I want to give him a shout out. Richard B. Curry Jr. He's the CEO and president of the Boys and Girls Club of East Alabama. I think from a not-for-profit organization, people see us as one that should go without. And he always says non-profit or not-for-profit isn't a business model. It's just a business type. So we don't do stuff to necessarily make an income, but that doesn't mean we should be broke. That doesn't mean that our employees should be, not paid well. Yeah. We shouldn't be compensated. We're just a tax designation, I think is what he says, for us. I think, when people look at, the government and they look at not-for-profits, they see, something different. But, at the end of the day, we're still a business model. Now, some of it, I think where people get confused is that, the goal of most businesses is to make money.
Yeah, to make profit.
Yeah, make profit. When you go to government and when you go to not-for-profit, ours are people focused. So sometimes the most effective may not be the most efficient. Yeah. The most effective may not be the most affordable. So, a lot of times we focus on, the outcome and making sure we can get the best outcome of it.
Okay. So looking at the way you transitioned, from grad school, you found yourself in, you fell in love with public administration and public service. And looking at the way you transition, many students leave the grad school with big expectations, about the kind of career they want. From your own experience, what's the biggest surprise about life after grad school?
Yeah, I think, for me, my journey was a little different. So I can't really speak for that. For me, it was, I started off working in, as a customer service rep. And it was during that I figured, sometime I would get an elevation. Hey, in the city, as long as I can get my foot in the door, I'll elevate very quickly. And then, throughout that process, it took me a lot longer. I probably applied for, 30 to 40 jobs within the city of Auburn before I got my first break. And now during that time, I did start my master's during that process. But, for me, and even starting that master's, I was like, that would give me the leg up. So the next time I apply for the job, next job, I'm able to say that, hey, I'm working on my master's, and that will give me my next step. But I was well into my master's, doing it part-time. It took me several years to do it before I got that really the neighborhood specialist job, which put me in the city manager's office with the city of Auburn. And that was kind of my first big break. But I think, as administrators and a lot of, people that go through the program, they think just the master's is what's going to sell you. And yes, in some sense, a master's from Auburn University Public Administration is great. But sometimes you do have to take that role that may be a step down for where you want to start at. And for me, be honest, there was some frustrating times when I was applying for these jobs and I would get these interviews and they would tell me you're so great, but you don't have that experience. Or, we found somebody that had more experience. And I kept asking myself, like, well, if I need experience to get my next step, how do I get that without somebody giving me the opportunity? So I struggle for that. So I think sometimes you just have to, take that one job and really grind at it. Even when I was customer service rep, what I started doing, I knew I wanted to elevate up. So I started showing up at city council meetings.
Okay. So, but do you think that, so I'll take you on your last, but do you think that volunteering, doing assistantship, internship could actually give you those experiences that organizations actually require for you to have?
Yes. I would say those all help. And I would say, whenever you're doing really any kind of volunteering and assistantships like that, you never know how that's going to circle back to your career. Yeah. So I would say anytime you're out volunteering, anytime you're out doing assistantships, you always got to be on your best behavior or you give your best foot forward because that may be, you never know. It may not be that you can, sometimes those do lead to jobs. If you do a really good job, most nonprofits, most government agencies are looking for good people. So a lot of times that could turn into something, long term. But also, from a standpoint of you never know who that person knows. Me as the director of operations for the Boys and Girls Club of East Alabama, I've worked in the city of Auburn. I've worked for the Housing Authority. I know other Boys and Girls Clubs. I know some other nonprofit leaders. So, somebody that comes in and does an assistantship with me, there's opportunities for me that when that person applies for that job to say, hey, I know that, this person came and I know AJ over there. Can you vouch for that person? Yeah. And if you leave that person with a bad experience, then I can't vouch for you because, it's hard to put your name out there for somebody if you don't, especially for somebody that I respect and as a professional, if that person didn't do a good job for me. So I think, sometimes when we're going through our master's program, there's a lot going on. And so we can see those volunteer opportunities or assistantship is kind of that extra thing. And we just got to get through it. But that really could be what makes or break you as far as your career post the MPA. Yeah.
So looking at it from the role that you occupy now as Director of Operations at Boys and Girls, what are those qualities or skills you expect from somebody who wants to intern with boys and girls?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing in this public sector job that communication is key. And I think, now, I don't want to date myself, but I feel like, as young people, sometimes we can lack that communication. Even just communicating, hey, I'm not going to make it into work today. As I, and this is no knock on MPA students, but a lot of the kids that I get from Auburn University, whether they're undergrad, mostly we deal with undergrad people, but that's one key thing that I see that people struggle with. It's a lot of last minute, and when we're depending on you as a volunteer, hey, it may be a special program that I'm depending on you to be there to help us run. And at the last minute, you tell us that you can't make it. Then now we got to shift, and that may cause somewhere else in the organization to go out. So it may mean that now I've got to leave my office from, making this grand plan to come over there and help for X, Y, and Z. So that communication side of things, I think is just a big thing. But I also think, eagerness and openness. I think a lot of times, and I will say the last two MPA students, I think, did a really good job of this is, when we kind of talked about what their assistantship was going to look like, it was one way, but we had to shift it and just being open to that shift, and just being open to that experience because now, yes, I may think that, in the MPA program that I really want to, work on this side of things. And so I'm dead set on always getting experience over here. but you never know what the experience on the other side may open you up and may open your eyes, but also better prepare you. Even if it's a bad experience, it may make you say that, hey, I want this more, so I'm gonna go harder for this side. So just that openness, I think, are the two biggest things. And just having a good personality. One thing my boss said to me when I got to the Auburn Housing Authority was that, we can't teach personalities, we can't teach attitudes, but we can teach, you information, and we can work with you on the skills. You may not know everything in this job right now, but if you come in with a good attitude, you come in with a good personality and one that's willing to work, then we can, give you the training. We can, work you through some of this other stuff. And I think that's what a lot of people sometimes fail at. They come in with their mindset thinking it's going to be this way, and then when it isn't, they just kind of just drop back from it. But tackle those experiences.
Yeah. So looking at your years of experience in public service, are there skills that you feel that students are overlooking, but they need those skills to succeed?
Yeah.
Even if it is just one.
Yeah. I think, kind of going back to my last point, I think, from the MPA program, I learned a lot of information, from my public personnel class, from I was just telling somebody about some of the stuff we did in research methods and all of that, just probably right before I came here. There's a lot of good information in there, but when you get out into the real world, you start working with real people. So a lot of that information, yes, you may have learned it one way in class, but when you start dealing with people, there's a lot of different variables, and just being willing to work with people. And kind of letting go of those preconceived notions of what you thought it was. So I think that's probably the biggest thing that I would say. The information is great, but really working on yourself on, like, I go back to that communication, how you communicate, your openness, and all of that, I think serves you well. There's still stuff that I pull from the MPA program, but I think one of the biggest things, at least in my cohort and the people that I had experience, was just, a group of people that were open and willing to kind of expand their minds in the field is the biggest thing. And I think MPA program does do that. They try to open your eyes to new new things and new experience and new ways of thinking of things. I remember taking my NGO, non-governmental organizations class with Dr. Krawcheck back in the day, and how that opened my eyes to really how NGOs perform and their roles in government, and just taking that stuff and being open. So I do think people coming in, they do probably have thoughts on how government should operate, or how things should go, but just being open.
Okay. Yeah. All right. Thank you so much, AJ. I think we've been able to cover public service and expectations. So I would like to go into life after grad school.
Okay.
To get also your take and your experience. Yeah. So I would like to know, what was your first step after finishing grad school? Did you go on a vacation? Did you rest? Did you take more certificate courses? What exactly did you do?
Yeah. So, like I said, I'm a little bit different as far as my experience, but the main thing I did was take a deep breath. It's my journey is interesting, because when I started MPA program, I had one child, was working as a customer service rep. By the time that I didn't have anybody that reported to me. By the time I finished it, and that's within like a 3-year time span, I had 3 kids. So I was having I just had my son. He was a baby, and was in the midst of COVID. I was now working for the Housing Authority as the Director of Public Relations and Compliance. So I oversaw 20 people. So I went from not overseeing anybody to now my whole trajectory of where I was at. My life experience was different. So it was just taking a sigh of relief. I was just thankful, for really being able to get through the program. Because at one point I was like, am I going to be able to finish this? Because I'm doing this part-time, I'm a dad, I'm working, all of this is going on. But it was just a sigh of relief, and, thankful, and I post my degree behind my wall because I am happy. I'm proud of that degree because it was a struggle, and I'm glad I was able to accomplish the things that I was. But it's really just a sigh of relief, and just really being thankful for it was really big for me.
Yeah. So transitioning from being a student to now working full time.
Yeah.
Was it a challenge?
Yeah, I will say it definitely is a.
And also being a dad.
Yeah, yeah, it definitely is a challenge. I think anytime you can kind of focus your mind on one thing as your priority. It's easy to do that, but once you get into the real world, you start having a family, you start got to thinking about all these other things. Now your mind is kind of split. So yeah, it definitely was a transition for me. When I had one child, I had to think about one person, and then now I got three. So now there's three other people, including my wife, that I gotta think about during that standpoint. But yeah, I think that the transition for a lot of students is probably similar on that. I think a lot of students, as they go through, they're probably working part-time. But, once you get out of that program and there's no more classes, and now you got to, take that next step into your full-time career, it is kind of, eye-opening for a lot of students, and really, especially for those that probably had their mindset, on that, hey, I'm going to do, when I get out of the MPA program, I'm going right to here. Yeah. And sometimes your road may take you like this before you get there, or your road may take you a completely different direction, and being able and being open to embracing that journey. Yeah. For me, I go back to kind of my initial thing, thinking I was going to be an engineer. It took me a while to really come to grips that wasn't what my life was going to turn out to be. But, kind of that understanding that we can think that our career is going to go one way. But, there was, even when I got out of MPA, I never thought I'd be on the nonprofit side, not-for-profit side of things. But here I am, about to be 3 years in on it. I never thought I would go to housing authority work, but that opportunity presented itself, and it really gave me a lot of opportunities to do some of the stuff that, really gave me probably some of my best experiences as far as with compliance stuff, reading policies and having to make decisions and, overseeing, departments and all of that. So, always embrace the journey. It may not be what you thought it would be, but embrace your journey, because that journey is going to, prepare you for where you need it in life. You can always take something from everything you do. So
did your e-portfolio help you in this transition?
Yeah, e-portfolio, I think, for me as a student, really made me sit down and think about my MPA experience. When you have to think of what is your kind of theme of your MPA, how do you see yourself as an administrator? So having to sit down, at that point, I was working full time and, had a family. So making myself pause to be like, what am I really from an MPA person? Yeah. And, I think, from that, and then reminiscing from, okay, now I got to go back to classes that I may have took 2 years ago and think about, some of that stuff, and really kind of
all your artifacts
and all of that. It really made me, kind of sit back and really like, man, this was a journey, and it was a good journey, even though, toward the end of it, I was like, I'm ready to be done with it. But, it was a really good journey. But I think the portfolio for me just made me pause and let me really think about this journey in the MPA program, and really what my next step and how I'm going to be as an administrator, and how I want people to think about AJ as I go into this workforce. So, for me, it really gave me an opportunity, and I actually pulled it up not too long. I think it's still on one of the tabs of my phone, just to go back and look at it, like, who I said I was going to be, 4 or 5 years ago. Am I being that person now? And I think that's one of the things, it's always good to go back and ground yourself. Hey, when I got into public administration, I really wanted to make sure I was going to do this. Yeah. Am I doing that now? So I think that's one good thing, for me that I always value.
Has your public service philosophy changed?
No, I think, for me, public service, philosophy has always been about serving people and serving people to the highest, manner. And, I do think, my philosophy hasn't changed. I think sometimes our philosophy can get pushed to the back burner sometimes. So you have to remind yourself at the end of the day, you're about serving people.
Yeah.
You're about ensuring that people have, and I think that's always a good reminder to bring that back to the forefront. Why are you doing it? What's the why behind your what? So I don't think my philosophy changes, but I do think, it's good to remind yourself, because sometimes even though your philosophy changing, you're really that person at the root, but are you behaving the way that your philosophy says that you're going to behave? And I think sometimes we get deep into it and then we start behaving opposite of what our philosophy, we're making decisions, not based on what our philosophy says. And sometimes, it could be just, when you're working with people, it can be hard. And I think sometimes we, just from my perspective, and this is just people working in governmental agencies, I think dealing with people can taint people sometimes. And I think, we come into it with the best intentions and, wanting to help people. But when we get into it, we get so burdened and we feel, overloaded. And then now that philosophy starts to get into the back, and it's just about getting my work done. And getting through it. So I think, bringing that philosophy to the forefront of what we do, it's important, and don't lose sight of that, and just having a way to remind yourself, because you can get lost in it, because, in this government and this not-for-profit side of things, we do take on a lot, but that philosophy sometimes can drift away.
So during your transition, did you get to showcase your e-portfolio to potential recruiters to say, this is what I have done throughout my MPA program, these are the skills that I have, and were there some skills, that probably you didn't learn in the MPA program that you had to learn so quick, when you got out, out of the MPA program?
Yeah, like I said, I think my experience is a little bit different than some students, because, like I said, my transition kind of happened while I was in the MPA program. So I can't say that my e-portfolio at the end helped me. I wasn't able to showcase that, but what I was able during my time during the MPA program, as I was getting these new jobs, I was able to relate back to, hey, these are some of the things I'm learning in my master's program. These are some, and being able to recall some of that during my interviews. And I think that helped position me and kept helping me advance within it. So I was able to recall on some of that. I remember when I got to the Housing Authority, and, some of the questions was around, budgets and what's your experience around budgets? And I didn't really have any experience, coming from, being a customer service rep and then neighborhood specialist. They never gave me that, but I was able to say, hey, in the MPA program, we're studying budgets, and, we look at these things, and I understand these levels of budgets. And, that was kind of able to show that, I may not have the experience, but I do have the knowledge, and given the opportunity, I can conquer that. Okay.
So I know you've already said a couple of times that, you already had something doing while you were in the MPA program. Yeah. Right. And then you envisaged what success was for you, during that process. And by the time you got out of grad school, you also envisaged what success in any role that you were occupying meant, right? Yeah. So my question to you is, by the time you got out of grad school, did that view change for you of what success could be?
Yeah, that's a difficult one for me to answer. I don't know that necessarily my view on what success would be. I think what going through that process and going through the MPA process taught me that success can look a bunch of different ways, that there's no one path for success. Originally I thought that, hey, the only way for me to be successful was going to be an engineer. But, after going through this process and even going through, the transition from all these different governmental agencies, like, when I started with the city, my goal was to be a city manager. So, I thought, hey, I need to be with the city, work my way up, maybe become a department head, and then get to be a city manager. But then, that's what success looked like.
Look for you
And,
at that
and
time,
then,
yeah.
the opportunity came to come to the housing authority. So now my job is like, well, maybe I can be the executive director of a housing authority. And, that was what success looked like for me. And then now I'm in a not-for-profit as a director of operations. And so success looks like, hey, maybe it's an executive director of the Boys and Girls Club as a CEO and president of an organization like that. But understanding that success can look in a lot of different ways. And I think that's, for me, it's just going back to the point that being open and understanding that success can come in so many different ways.
Okay, how should students think about long-term career growth?
Yeah. So long-term career growth, like I said, understanding what motivates you, but also just being open, because I think the more experience that you can get in so many different levels, it helps you understand different components of the world, different components of careers. So if your goal is to be, some sort of, CEO or executive or whatever it is, just taking those experience and not locking yourself in a box. I think a lot of times, people, I only want to work in this line. And so sometimes we get here and then we get stuck because, maybe the person in front of us is not retiring soon.
Yeah.
And a lot of times, and when we talk about governmental agencies and even not-for-profits, that the only way to kind of elevate a lot of times is for somebody to retire or move on. So being open to, what else is out there, and if your ultimate goal is to be a leader up here, sometimes you may have to go down a different path to get to that standpoint. But also, there's no shame in sitting back and waiting. And I think a lot of times people are so eager to get to this end point, they don't enjoy the journey. And so we're such in a rush that once I got an MPA program in 3 years, I got to be here.
Yeah.
And so we're forcing ourselves to, do all of this stuff, looking for this 3-year journey. And sometimes it could mean that this 3-year journey is supposed to be 7. Yeah. And then we realize that after the 3rd year, and then we've wasted all this time.
Yeah. Earlier when I asked you about success, most people put kind of like a timeline for themselves and said, okay, maybe in the next 2 years I'll be here, 3 years I'll be here, 4 years I'll be here. And when all those doesn't play out the way that they have framed it, up here in their head, it becomes as if they have failed. And
it becomes depressing. To be honest. And then you can kind of question yourself. But, I think I would never knock anybody for having goals, but understand goals can shift. And being open to those shifts in your goal. And, just because those goals shift doesn't necessarily mean you have failed. It just means that you learn more. You may not even known that I never, like I said, going into undergrad, I never knew that public administration was a thing. Yeah. So, that doesn't mean that, I failed at being an engineer. I just found a new direction to go in. And I think, sometimes, we could be so closed off when we don't allow those openness to do it. Yeah. But, it's good to have goals and, kind of, have some direction to go in, but also being open that those goals may shift, and it's okay to shift those goals. Yeah. But also not putting, a hard cap on yourself, because it may take you 10 years to get where you thought in 3 years. But, if we're so focused on the 3 years that we're not going to enjoy that journey to get to 10 years there. But I also think, people that elevate fast sometimes don't take pride in their experience. For me, I struggled getting my undergrad. I had a few academic issues in undergrad, but when I got my bachelor's degree, I cherished that degree because the struggle and the path that I had to go during my master's program, from going from being one child to having 3 and going through the struggles during COVID, I cherished my degree. So my journey, puts a passion in me that may not have been there if it would have been an easy journey for me. So I think, those bumps in the roads, those things, let it fuel you, let it create that passion inside you and that motivation.
Yeah. So we are winding down. Yeah. But are you considering furthering, maybe getting your doctorate or something?
Yeah, so that actually is a thought of mine. So, one thing that, kind of when you get to be a professional, sometimes you're so focused on like accomplishing your task that you forget about, investing in yourself.
Yourself, yeah.
So that's one thing that I've been kind of, looking at. How can I invest in myself? How can I keep improving my skills? How can I keep becoming, a better leader? So I am, I've always been wary of doing a PhD, but that's in the back of my mind now that may be the next step and something that more so probably around like a leadership. I want to diversify, my degrees a little bit. So, doing some sort of leadership PhD or something like that is kind of what I'm looking into.
So AJ, where you've been through the MPA program, and currently you're occupying a leadership role. Are there better ways that you feel institutions, I mean, you're in a better position to respond to this question. Do you think that there are better ways institutions should be able to teach students so that, there could be that blend of classroom, balancing that classroom learning and, the workforce reality?
Yeah, I definitely think there's probably a good balance. For me, one thing that, like I said, I think that helped my experience is that I was working the full time through there. So, fusing some sort of, I think, I know the assistantship or the internship comes at the end of your program, but typically at that point you're so far down your school and it's hard to make any changes. So maybe implementing something early on in the process to where you can get some experience in, like some deep experience. I know, this easy way is to go volunteer 20 hours, but there's not much you can learn from going somewhere from 20 hours in a semester. So infusing some sort of experience where you get a really insight until, if I choose this path or if I'm doing this, what can my experience be? Because you can learn a lot about it, and then it may change the way that you sit in class, or you behave in class during some of those. So I think, anytime you can give people real experience in it and finding a way, and I don't have the answer for that of how you do that, earlier on in the process. Do
you think bringing alumni, to be probably like guest speakers or guest lecturers in classrooms could also be helpful?
Yeah, I definitely think anytime you can have an alumni, because I think it's good for students to see that this person went through the program and now they're here and hearing from their experiences, and also bringing a variety of different people. Because, I have a unique experience during the MPA program, and it may not connect with everybody. But there may be another alumni that may connect more with you, and now you can see yourself in that alumni. So, bringing back up, a bunch of alumni, throwing this idea, and maybe something that y'all can coordinate, maybe like a alumni weekend or alumni day where people can just come back and there's some sort of, interaction between, alumni. I love coming back to speak to MPA students. That's something that I really value. I love my time during Auburn MPA, and I always tell them anything that I can do from my standpoint, if that's coming to talk to a class. A lot of my professors aren't here as much, so I don't have as much a connection. But I have come back and taught the classes before, and I'm willing to do that. But I do think that's a good time, time for people to experience, because now I could tell you, okay, what's my MPA experience and how, what we're doing right now and how it relates, and what I would do differently, how I would behave differently in this class if I knew what I knew now. So I do think that that's some really good experience, because it can make connections for young people.
Okay, so I'll just ask the last question, and I expect you to give me your closing statement with this.
Okay.
Yeah, but this is more like advice to our audience and to students who are going to listen and watch, this episode. So
yeah.
You said you put out over 40 applications before one came through, right?
Yeah.
So there are students who may be feeling uncertain about what comes next after grad school. So looking back, what would you tell your younger self if you were in their shoes?
Oh, yeah. I would tell myself, younger self, to embrace the journey. Like I said, I was one that put that cap on myself. Hey, I need to be here. I've got my bachelor's. I need to be in a role like this in 2 years. And, it took me a lot longer than 2 years to go there. So embrace the journey. It's going to be okay. You may get declined on this position, but if you didn't get that position, it just means that position wasn't for you. And then also tell myself that, you have to sometimes you got to step out of, your day-to-day role in order to get your next step. So it may be that you may have to do some stuff off the clock. Like I said, I started it, toward the end of my time getting a new position, but started going to city council meetings because I wanted to know as much as I could about what was going on with the city. Reading the agendas, reading all of that, being able to communicate that. And, so if I did get an interview, I could speak to what was happening. That department head that may not know me otherwise is like, oh, I seen that guy at the city council meetings. So making that investment into yourself, but also like I said, embracing that journey, and just realizing, the job that you think may be for you may not be for you. And you have to keep going and being open to whatever that is. And that would be how I would encourage myself, like, don't get burned out with your journey, stay encouraged. You're going to get there, and someday you'll get somewhere where you'll be happy and satisfied, but also be happy and satisfied where you're at currently.
Thank you so much, AJ. I think this is a good place to draw the curtain, and we appreciate AJ. AJ Harris is an alumni, and we're happy that he accepted, to be on this podcast and speak on this episode. So AJ, thank you very much, and we'll be happy to have you back on another episode on this podcast.
Yeah, anytime. I'm open anytime. I love this. This was enjoyable. I thank you all for thinking of me, and War Eagle.
War Eagle. Yeah, thank you so much, guys, and to our audience, we thank you so much for always tuning in and watching our episode. We are here because you watch and you listen to us. Thank you, and stay tuned to our next episode.